Good day, Nigerians. Happy Democracy Day to you. 19 years of uninterrupted democratic rule, and today we're reviewing the government of President Muhammadu Buhari so far. To join us in this conversation, it's our pleasure to make very welcome a political economist, a politician himself, having run for office in 2007 and 2011. He's the founder of the Center for Value in Leadership. He's Professor Patrick Utomi, also known as Professor Pat Utomi. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us this morning.
Great pleasure.
All right, now this year, 2018, makes it 19 years in total that Nigeria has seen uninterrupted democratic rule, and in particular 3 years of the President Muhammadu Buhari-led administration. We'd like to ask you, sir, what your thoughts are on his governance after 3 years, particularly with regards to what he promised at the beginning of his tenure.
Well, all governing is work in progress. Clearly, there's work going on right now. I don't think that anybody would dare to say that the great aspirations of 2014 have necessarily been met, but I think it's important at this point in our history that we maintain an understanding that keeps a delicate balance. When people talk about Nigerian problems, I have to stop myself sometimes and say, there's a place for statesmen, there's a place for commentary of different kinds. Our country is on the edge. I don't quite think most people realize how close Nigeria is to tipping over. And so there's a place for statesmen to manage what is looming and save the future for everybody. Let me tell you what in my view is the gospel truth of my understanding of the Nigerian condition. In 1999, 2000, there was a book published, written by an American of significant influence in the sense that he had written a previous book that was titled Balkan Ghosts. His name is Robert Kaplan. Balkan Ghosts predicted what eventually happened after Tito died in the Balkans and all those terrible things we followed on television, all those wars and people now being tried, and he predicted that in that book. But about 99, 2000, he wrote another book. It's titled The Coming Anarchy, in which he more or less projected that West Africa would descend into anarchy. And the epicenter for that descent into anarchy was Nigeria. In fact, he went as far as locating a city called Jos in Nigeria as where the ethnic, religious, economic or class cleavages will come together. And after I saw him interviewed on CNN and I read the book, I was worried enough to found a group that we call NUTRA, Nigerians United to Resist Anarchy. I, in fact, made effort and sent to some of my friends in the security services at the top copies of the book to be. In fact, one of them indeed called me when in 2001, I believe, 2 years later, the Jos riots began. And it's been downhill since then. 12 years ago, 20 years ago, I would talk about the road to Somalia, how Nigeria really is tracking the road to Somalia. But I'm desperate that we don't get there. And part of that means that as a statesman, one needs to manage a number of things more carefully than just a brutal speaking of truth to power.
Rightly said. Now, we know that in the past you have not held back when it comes to talking and being the opposition to the government of the day. However, now you're sort of taking a more objective, or would I say more relaxed stance in terms of let's look at what's going to move us forward as opposed to just criticizing the government. Is that your stance at the moment?
Not really, no. I've remained as critical and speaking truth to power as I always was. But the danger before Nigeria right now is so much more that if you are truly a mature statesman, you've got to understand that there's a greater need to manage some things with care. We're at the precipice, any small thing can tip Nigeria over that precipice. Another book by Karl Mayer came out, and Karl Mayer's book was titled This House Has Fallen, Midnight in Nigeria. That sense for where Nigeria was going was emerging, and the kinds of critical commentary that people like me made was driven by the fact of trying to sensitize this elite that doesn't seem to think, that doesn't read, that just looks at what it can grab now to see what was coming to Nigeria. That was so heavy, and I was, coming, but they proved to be what they were said to be. Dumb elite doesn't think. And so Nigeria has reached that edge. 1999 was tragedy for Nigeria. Traditional politicians, the kinds of people who know that politics is about service and all of that, the followers of the Awolowas, the Sadawanas, the Zigs and co, who, yes, they may have pushed to the brink in some things, but they generally understand that this is about service, it's about contestation for advance of the common good. They were not quite sure the army was going away in 1999, and all kinds of cult boys and thugs moved into the political space, managed to get some kind of alignment, if you will, with the group I call the class of state capture, and a group of small people who have dominated Nigeria for 50 years. Nigeria has sadly defined everything as politics. Politics is where you go and get rich. Politics is where you get power. The contesting arena of prestige shrunk. We really need to begin again.
Now, you've been credited to saying once that any politician who's been in government for 12 years consecutively is a social parasite. Indeed, you said that there's a disconnect with them, with the people, and so at some point, they shouldn't, so from going from governor to Senate, from Senate going on to, going into other parts of governance, and that we need to inject new blood, as it were, into governance in Nigeria. You've also been known to have pushed for youth involvement in politics, and only this morning, the president in his speech spoke about his pride at signing into law the Not Too Young to Run bill. Now, elections 2019 is here. It's almost, indeed, if you haven't started anything, it's almost as if you shouldn't even bother because you ought to have started some groundwork. What would you say with regards to the involvement of young people running in politics and the older people who have been in government for over 12 years? We've had 19 years, and some people have been in governance since 1999 when we first celebrated Democracy Day. What's your take on that?
Well, first of all, I think that if democracy is about giving service through a representational system, surely the people who are giving service will recognize that there are millions of others who can give that same service. There's nothing special about them. So first, just a general sense of decency suggests perhaps there should be more reshuffling to get more talent to come in, and we can learn from what different talents bring in. That's at a very general level. Secondly, if what is required is experience to get things done. Now, experience comes from first experiencing what the people want, what the people need, how the people are, what they feel. There's no doubt in my mind that if you get into power in a country like Nigeria, you are instantly disconnected from the people. You are isolated from the people. If you stay in that arena for 15, 20 years unbroken, you don't know who the people are, you don't know what the people feel. In terms of experience, these guys have no experience at all. If you left university, your first job is local government councillor. Your next job is commissioner. Your other job is senator. Your other job is governor. You have zero experience repeated every year for the last 20 years. You are unfit to govern. Not because there's something wrong with you, but the capacity isn't there. Many of these guys, if they work for UAC, would not make junior manager. How come we are entrusting our lives lives of millions of people and billions of dollars to people who, if I were a manager in UAC, I would not appoint a junior manager. There's something wrong with that, but that's what's going on in Nigeria. So we're living a tragedy here.
Nigeria is 58 years, and we do not seem to have had a good grasp of security in the country. Now, the present administration came in 2015 with a lot of high hopes for Nigerians concerning how to tackle security. How would you score the present government of President Muhammadu Buhari regarding security across the country?
From get-go, I was worried about the security strategy. I was worried because the strategy emphasized management of the instruments of violence. Look, most of Nigeria's security problems come from an unjust economic system that is leaving most of its people unemployed and allowing a few people to buy private jets at will. That system invariably produces violence. Now, a second thing, again, you know, one of the sad things about what our politics has done is that it has made thinking look like a bad thing. You know, if you think, they say, theory, grammar, and that one go chop. No society has made progress, has managed it without thinking people. And one of the things that we fail to think about, and we have all this headsmen business, running all the troubles with headsmen, what really is at the root of this problem? People have not explained it, and partly those who are in charge don't seem to have done enough thinking about the roots. People make it look at a political thing, you know, you want to dominate these people. I don't know if any such plan is there, maybe it is there, I don't know. But I think that a thinking process will tell you that there's a sociological phenomenon of change in the nature of that business, the herding business. 30, 40 years ago, the headsman was an entrepreneur who owned his cattle. And he sought to manage, there were always friction. There will always be friction between those two, you know, the people who plant and the people whose stock feed off. There will always be tension, there always has been. But it was better managed in those days when the people who ran those headsmen operations were entrepreneurs, owned their cattle. Today, most of them are not owners of the cattle. They are essentially employed people. There is frustration in the system amongst them at the fact of they have no real worth anymore. Before, their entire worth, their self-worth, was defined by their cattle. Now they don't own that cattle. And part of the way that that problem is playing out is in this violent engagement with communities that traditionally would have been their host communities and stuff like that. So there's a thinking problem in solving problems. And because that depth of understanding has been missed, we're compounding issues and letting stereotypes further deepen the cleavages.
Very true. Now, as you have mentioned, some people have attributed it to being a cultural issue. Some have said it's a religious factor. But like you mentioned, we do not employ critical thinking in solving problems in Nigeria. Now, moving away from security, another aspect of the economy that the president had spoken about when he was sworn in was that he was going to fight against corruption. Now, one of the major principles of the administration today was that he was going to go on an anti-graft war. Only yesterday, Transparency International released a report about security votes and talked about it being one of the biggest avenues through which corruption thrives in Nigeria. And it's been seen traditionally, or history has proven, that towards the election year, there's a huge percentage increase, spiking in the amount allocated, billions of dollars to security votes. It's not transparent, it's opaque, you don't know what they're spending the money on. It's across states, at federal level. Now, do you think it's time for us to do away with security votes? That's one. Then the second is that you have praised yourself, President Buhari, as being a man who is transparent and a corrupt-free leader. Now, do you think his administration it doesn't look very well on his administration to see that this hasn't changed. We saw it during the Jonathan-led administration. During his administration, we're still having the same problems and challenges with corruption, particularly security votes. What's the way forward?
Well, I have always railed against the security vote thing. As far as I'm concerned, it is corruption simpliciter. There is no explanation for me on that. I have said to people that, you know, in many states, if you give me the security vote, I will change the economy of the state with just the security vote. Look, there's this idea that I keep throwing around. By the way, you know, at Senator Bola Ahmed Tinubu's birthday, the vice president went through these conditional cash transfer programs and all of that, and I was very excited at how they were working and all of that. Those were ideas that came out of Brazil. Those were ideas that entered the APC manifesto on the desk behind me here. And those ideas, I think many state governments need to implement. And I have said that you could easily, in some states, give every poor mother 7,000 naira every month by just taking the security vote and just a portion of it. And if you then condition it on a number of factors, what you could do in transforming the quality of life of people could be unbelievable. But these security votes, because of the way we treat them, are seen as play gifts for people who get to those positions. I think it is unfair. I think it is immoral. I think we need to change it. But even if you can rationalize a security vote, I think it is important that there be oversight. Yes, security, you don't want to talk about security in the streets, but even in the US government, all the things that CIA and whatever do with all kinds of money, there is a committee in the Congress which also has that high level of sense of security of the state that has oversight over that vote. I know that the tragedy of our oversight system and our assemblies is that it becomes a place where you then trade how much will you give me for this. Yeah, sadly, yes. But there needs to be, look, the reason that you have legislatures, the primary reason you have legislatures is that the money that government disburses belongs to the people. And because of that, you need the people's representatives to have oversight over it. And this is precisely why in the US Congress, for example, it is the House of Representatives that has a Ways and Means function. And for that reason, members of the House of Representatives are elected every 2 years, whereas senators can be there for 6 years, because if you misuse our money, we can recall you within 2 years. That's the whole logic of the representation system in the US government.
A lot of people have described the anti-graft war of President Buhari as just one of those weapons against the opposition. What do you think about this?
You know, the same thing was said when President Obasanjo was there and set out Nuhu Ribadu on people that said he was going for his opponents. And what I said back then is the same thing I will say now. No variance, no variation, same thing. If he will first get his enemies, let him get his enemies, so long as they are guilty. Then we will talk about his friends later.
In commemoration of Democracy Day, and particularly because you're a historian, it would be great for you to look back and look forward as well. So with the benefit of hindsight, using that to encourage Nigerians, or perhaps talk to Nigerians looking at elections 2019 and democracy going forward for Nigeria, what final word would you leave for us and Nigerians who are watching?
2019 provides us a great opportunity to take government away from politicians. Our democracy so far has been a government of politicians, for politicians, by politicians. Nigerians, in seeing that these governments are not working for them, must say to themselves, we want to take our country back. If they do that, great for their children. If they don't do that, Nigeria could be moving towards a bloody revolution.
And then finally, sir, you are one of the founding members of the APC. What would you have to say? What's your word to the APC House, as the House seems to be in some sort of disarray just a few months away from the elections?
Sorry, in addition to that, so that you answer everything at once, we have to just ask you to score the present administration. 3 years in government, percentage 100 out of 100. How would you score them?
Okay, well, first of all, let me start with the last one. You'll agree that it's not appropriate to ask a member of a party to score, so that's not fair. You know?
I thought to put you on the spot.
But the other part of the question, which is what to do, you know, we founded a group called NIM, okay? And the essence of that group was to mobilize professionals, serious-minded Nigerians who normally look at politics and say, to say, if you don't get involved, you will be sorry what will happen to you. Get involved. Get into any party of your preference, APC, PDP, even a new one being founded, and make sure that you put your imprimatur on how the country is governed. Those who are in the APC, I think, have a duty to make sure that the party matures along the lines originally conceived. And nobody will tell you that it is not true that the APC hasn't gone the way we conceived of it. Comrade Adams Oshomole, I think, speaking recently, said, look, we have to begin to rethink the kinds of people in the APC, who is allowed in there. It was conceived as a party of progressives, of people-centered players. To win elections, many of these PDP people came in, and now nobody can recognize the party. And so you have all these factions, multiple congresses, and so on and so forth. I think the effort must be to reclaim the original APC. And if that is done, perhaps it can still offer Nigeria. It's very easy to sweep everything away. Okay, APC is useless, true. PDP is useless, true. But what do? We must work with something that we have.
We must work with something.
And begin to develop it and get it better. People forget, and I always remind people, that if you lived 200 years ago in the United States of America, the Republican Party was the party of the poor, the party of Abraham Lincoln, the party that sought justice. The Democratic Party was the party of those rednecks and all of those people. But today, the reverse is the case. You can remake political parties, and the time to remake these parties is now. But it will not happen until real well-meaning people, driven by service, pure service. And I was reflecting this morning about the concept of service. It struck me, and I really say this quite honestly, my happiest moments are moments when I look at the face of somebody of whom I have been of service, or for whose cause I have been out there, and I see a smile. That really defines the man. When I wrote an autobiography under pressure from some publisher more than 20 years ago, well, about 90, in the mid-90s, the book was titled, To Serve is to Live. I think our politics must be the arena of service, or it will all be lost.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed, sir. Thank you for your time. We have been speaking with Professor Patrick Utomi, and he has analyzed the economy and the Nigerian government in the past 19 years, and most importantly, the past 3 years under the leadership of President Muhammadu Buhari. Again, we're looking forward. Elections 2019 is upon us, and of course, we will have conversations and discussions around this. This is Plus TV, and we have been speaking with Professor Patrick Utomi for our Democracy Day broadcast.